Welcome to AWS Supports You. I'm your host, Stephen Hevern, and I am based out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Joining me today are Shaz and Emily from AWS Support. Can you give us a quick introduction?
Sure. Thanks, Stephen. Hi, everyone. This is Shatak Sharma. I also go by Shaz, and I'm a senior technical account manager here at AWS. Thank you.
Hey, my name's Emily Sims. I'm an incident detection management engineer, and I'm based out of Kansas City, Missouri.
Thanks for coming on the show today. We will be covering incident detection response in add-on service for enterprise support, specifically focusing on onboarding your workloads and applications to this AWS service. Before we get into the details, a quick note to the attendees online. Please use the chat to let us know where you're joining us from and ask questions throughout the episode. Please use the link to our survey in the chat to let us know what you think of the show. Shaz, can you take us through the service onboarding?
Sure. Before we go to the onboarding section today, we wanted to do a quick recap because there are a few things that have changed since our last session. So excited to share some of the new things that are coming on with the service, but let's do a quick recap. So AWS Incident Detection and Response is a new premium support service that offers customers 24/7 proactive monitoring and critical incident management for selected workloads. Just a note, this service is available in AWS Managed Services and is an add-on to your enterprise support.
So you have to have enterprise support first before using the service.
Absolutely. Yep. So as we discussed in the previous session, there are 4 key pillars of the service. We are offering improved observability because we are helping our customers to define critical alarms on their application layer. And then, as part of the engagement, we provide additional observability on AWS infrastructure and services. This translates into early incident detection because we are doing 24/7 workload monitoring, and we are monitoring these specific alarms that we have agreed on, which are critical for your workload. We are offering engagement time of 15 minutes of an incident. So this is an SLO. So what we are really striving for is when that alarm goes off, we are doing a quick triage and we are executing agreed runbooks to engage the customers, engage the experts to get the rapid help that you need to get your workload out of pain. Now, improved observability, early incident detection. Now that's going to lead into faster resolution because, as I mentioned, we will have access to experts to guide you through recovery. We are executing predefined response plans and runbooks, and we are providing live engagement. As part of the live engagement, we will stay on the call with you to ensure that you're getting all the help that you need until and unless your workload is green.
And I think, Shaz, that's kind of important to note, right? That's really where the value comes in because you're working with the customer to get this set up, and you're going to be able to respond quickly because you already have an understanding of what they're doing, what their workload's doing or application is doing, and then really be able to gauge the right specialist as needed on the back end quickly.
Absolutely. So that's why workload onboarding is such a critical piece for this engagement, because we really want to understand what your workload is, how is it configured, what kind of help that you may need, and we are prepping ourselves to make sure we are ready to go when the need arises, right? So even though all these 3 pillars may seem pretty reactive, we are really going for reduced potential for failure. This is really what our customers want. So we are implementing a continuous learning mechanism. The intention is that by every engagement, your experience is going to get better and better. You can ask why? Because we are providing proactive services along with all these engagements where the larger account team, the technical account managers, the solution architects can actually focus on strategic initiatives to help with your resiliency and also the observability posture of the workload. We can bring in the right experts on the long run to ensure that you are able to prevent issues on the long run, and also make your application more resilient. So as part of the established mechanisms, we do have a feature for post-incident review, which focuses on providing you that level of detail where we are analyzing at what time the alarm went off, what were the actions taken, what elements were actually triaged, and how do we improve it, right? So these kind of data points are shared after the engagement, and then your larger account team runs with the strategic initiatives to make sure that your workload is more resilient, can withstand failures, and you are able to meet your business objectives to ensure there is no impact or minimal impact to your customers.
And I think that's important to note. A couple of things that you said there were, like one, you talked about it being an enterprise support. You're going to work with TAMs like myself, or solutions architects, to kind of work with the customer and make sure they know the workload. But I think for me, the other value here is you're also providing that feedback. If there's an incident, right, you can provide that feedback of what can we do to mitigate that in the future and address that. And I think there's a lot of times where, we get into situations and where I've worked previously, you get in these situations where you're in the fire drill, you're in the moment, you've got past that problem, and now you're on to the next thing, right? And you're not able to kind of go back and do that. Really, what can we do to fix that? And it's a continual flywheel, if you will, to get you always improving and finding those ways to keep that from happening again.
Absolutely. So just to go a little bit deeper, what we see on the screen is what we are seeing with our customers on the left-hand side, right? So today with AWS Enterprise Support, what we see is that customers spend a lot of time triaging some of the alarms, trying to figure out where the smoking gun is. I personally have been in a situation in my previous role where I was looking at around 5,000 monitors, and none of them were firing, but our application was completely down. We were really not taking any orders, right? So we want to make sure we provide that level of signal to our customers to say, okay, it looks like we have analyzed these many categories. Looks like this seems to be an issue. Let us engage you and get you the experts that you need, right? So as you continue to see on the left-hand side of things, there is significant time that is lost during a critical incident where we're trying to figure out whom do we need to resolve the issue. And even when the customers engage us, there is a context setting time that takes to bring everyone up to speed, right? You may or may not have engaged your TAMs at that point of time. And even if you do, once we have the engineers on the call, we need to make sure that they understand the problem statement, they understand the criticalness of the issue, and we're trying to make sure we can get you that required help. Now, yeah, go ahead.
And Shaz, I was going to say that to me, I've been on calls with customers, and that time and that where you circle around trying to get to understanding what's going on or what the application is doing. Even when you have an operations team on the customer side that might come in, they may not be fully familiar with some different things or different aspects or dependencies, right? And you spend a lot of cycles trying to just get to understanding where do we need to look. We have alarms firing, but we're not sure how do we get to that next level, that deeper piece to it. And it sounds like this could really help shorten that cycle and get everybody focused on the problem more quickly.
Yeah, and you brought up a really good point, right? Because it's not like we are never aware of how our customers are implementing a workload, but things change, right? There might be additional traffic on the workload. There might be new upgrades, new features that are being implemented both from a technical perspective and also business perspective, right? So when we get onto a triage call, the things that we learned when the workload was migrated initially might not be true anymore or might have deviated from the baseline, right? So again, we're trying to make sure we stay ahead of that. This engagement provides the technical account managers a mechanism to learn more about the customers, stay close to the observability metrics, and also the customers can share on what are the changes that are happening. So when the need arises, We are not starting from scratch. We already have the required knowledge to triage the issue. So that translates to the expedite or accelerated recovery path when minutes matter on the right-hand side of your screen, right? So as soon as the alarm goes off, we can configure the runbooks to create these cases automatically, right? So let me give you a quick example. So let's say there is an alarm for orders per minute and the threshold is 10. We know that alarm needs to be higher than 10, and if it goes below, there's an issue. As part of the onboarding, we would have already documented and understood what all contributes to that metric itself. So there might be an RDS layer, or database layer, or a compute layer. So we would know that, okay, when this alarm reaches or goes below the threshold, we need to engage and triage these 3 specific AWS services. So we are cutting those cases automatically, doing a quick triage, and giving that feedback on a call with you, which is a live engagement, so that you can rule out or actually investigate and resolve issues faster.
And it doesn't have to be reactive, right? Or one of a specific CloudWatch alarm. You could make it a synthetic transaction, and you can also set that threshold to before it's going to breach and become a problem, right? If you know 10 orders per second is what you should be doing, and it starts to go to 8 or 9, you could get there a little sooner versus waiting to become a reactive problem.
Yeah, so that's the amazing thing about the service, because this is a very flexible framework, right? If our customers feel that, okay, at 10 I'm down and out, right? So I need to be a little more aggressive with the thresholds that signify impact, right? What we really don't want to do is create a bunch of alarms which are waking a bunch of people and are not really relevant, right? We want those alarms to signify impact. We want to make sure we can call out a fire before it can be seen 100 miles away. So we want to stay close to that trigger as much as possible and get you that help. And this can be customized for every kind of workload, for any kind of service that has a metric we can track. And at this point, we all know we can create custom metrics with CloudWatch, right? So I think that's the kind of alarm we are going for. But not all of our customers are tracking business level metrics in CloudWatch today. So we want to extend that support to the technical aspects as well. So ready to support whatever metric makes sense for our customers. Perfect. So I'm going to talk about 4 key pillars around how do we onboard a workload. I'm going to talk about the flywheel approach, and then we're going to quickly figure out how to configure your accounts to enable AWS incident detection and response. And then I'm going to hand this over to Emily to go deeper into it. So what we're really trying to do here is do a workload review. We want to gain context of your workloads as we discussed. Set up observability to monitor the underlying AWS infrastructure and services. Define critical alarms at the application layer to track the key outcomes of the workload. And then finally, we will be defining response plans and runbooks for managing critical incidents. And to a topic that we discussed, this is the approach we really want to follow, right? What we're really trying to do is when the incident triggers, we are integrating to it via AWS Event Bridge. What do you need to do that? I'm going to go in a few minutes. But when an alarm goes off, incident management team, or Emily for our call, is going to triage the alarm, and the support case will be created. And then we'll work through the incident resolution. On a case-by-case basis, we will provide post-incident review, and that kind of leads to a continuous learning and improvement mechanism where we are actually supplementing this flywheel approach with the experts, with kind of SMEs that can be brought in to further optimize this cycle. At the end, we do expect that, okay, your workloads are resilient enough. You may or may not need incident detection response on the long run because you are able to cater to some of the failures at a workload or application level itself.
So
Yeah.
So with that, I think this is a lot of times where I see customers that I work with struggle, right? They may not have the resources or the expertise in some of these things, and observability can be hard, right? And because there's so many things that you can look at, you can monitor, and if you turn on everything, you just end up with all this noise. And being able to kind of hone that down to something specific can really, really take some time and effort. And I think that's where here you can work with customers. Emily can work with customers to be able to help go through that, understand what's the correct stuff, what are the best practices with this, and how does it make sense to put these in the right place to start with.
Yep, absolutely.
And it sounds like too, like even though they could use this service, if they'd use this to develop some of that maturity in their applications, and then they could move on and just take this over, and they have the playbooks and the ability to manage this on our own going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. We definitely want customers' workloads to mature and be proactive with all the new developments and the new features and the new dependencies they are taking from a resiliency standpoint. So in the next section, I'm just going to quickly share my screen. I'm going to quickly go over the initial steps that our customers need to take to enable the service. So I'm just going to quickly share my screen. And please let me know once you're able to see.
Here it is. There it is.
Perfect. Okay, so the first step is we're going to cut AWS support case. What we're really trying to do here is to make sure that, yes, the accounts that you're trying to enroll are subscribed to enterprise support. Now, why did I say accounts? Because what we are trying to do is really onboard a workload. And as per the well-architected framework definition of a workload can be any solution that solves business function. It can reside in a single account. It can be cross-account, multiple accounts, right? So we want to make sure we understand, okay, what's the scope, and then whether all the accounts fulfill the requirements of which will allow them to be onboarded to AWS Incident Detection and Response. So on your screen, I just went into the account and billing section. You are picking billing, category other billing questions, severity is general. In the next screen, what we're going to do is we're going to provide additional details on what is the account information and when do you want to enroll these accounts into the service. And the reason we are providing the data is because the date that you provide is when the billing of those accounts as part of the service starts, right? So workload onboarding, bringing in the SMEs is all included in the subscription when you get this started.
So I shouldn't put in yesterday as the date that I want this.
Absolutely.
Okay. And you don't have to, so that's important, right? If you maybe you have hundreds of accounts and in your organization, but the two things to call out is you only want the accounts that are specific to this workload. So you can really kind of just focus in on that. And it also sounds like something that I have conversations with our customers, that you should have some good organization and account practices where you have those workloads separated out to different accounts and to for security and control. But it also will help in terms of being able to onboard this service.
Yeah, and obviously it's not a blocker that there are no multiple accounts, but yes, we would like to capture as much information about the spread of the workload in the support case, so our internal teams can actually validate the request and give the service team a heads up that, okay, it looks like we do have an incoming request. Let's start working through it. Your larger account team is ideally at that point of time is already engaged, and they will actually work with the customers for the workload onboarding and other details. So once the support case is actioned on and you are working through the infrastructure related setup, now your question is, how is AWS gonna integrate to the CloudWatch alarms that you're setting up? And just a quick update, As of this year, we are now supporting New Relic integration as well. So we will have follow-up sessions where we're going to go deeper into some of the alarm configurations and the things that you need to do. But for today's session, what we are going to demonstrate is that we do have a service linked role now for AWS incident detection response, which is part of the AWS health infrastructure. So what you're really doing is you will be running a CLI where you say, okay, I want to create a service linked role which trusts event processor health Amazon AWS.com, and it'll create a service linked role for you.
And while you're setting that up, I thank you, Snickerdoodle Coffee. I appreciate the love for my beard.
Perfect. So at this point, we have created AWS service role for health event processor. I'm just going to quickly pull it up, and we should have the role created.
And as you're pulling that up, so this is to enable those accounts, again, just in those accounts. If you have 3 or 4 accounts, you would do the same thing in each of those accounts to enable that access. And that's now going to give you or incident response teams the ability to get in there and to be able to work with the customer to set up those alarms and to work with the account team as well.
That is correct. So this will be created to all the accounts that are being onboarded. This role allows us to create an event bridge rule to build that integration between CloudWatch and our systems. So we will be ingesting the CloudWatch alarms that you tell us as part of the onboarding. And we're going to go through that as part of our discussion with Emily. So I'm going to actually stop sharing the screen and actually let Emily run the show, and she will share more details.
Sweet. Perfect. Hello, my name is Emily Sims. I'm an incident management engineer with the AWS Incident Detection and Response team. I'm here to discuss the process of onboarding your workloads with our team. Just in case you don't already know, we refer to your individual applications in your architecture as workloads. To briefly recap, the AWS Incident Detection Response team's goal is to make the onboarding process as simple and seamless as possible. Let me move on. Here we go. Just a brief recap on this slide. This is just a general overview of our operation. Initially, there's an interactive review process of your current AWS structure. The technical account manager plus incident detection response will discuss setting up observability and monitoring. We will work together with you to define your critical alarms and create response plans and runbooks. Normally, the entire setup can take a total of 3 to 4 weeks. We and your technical account manager will build a schedule together to fine-tune your metrics and best support your business. My team requires 3 particular pieces of information from you during the initial phase we refer to as workload discovery. We need any architectural information pertaining to the applications you are interested in having us support. This will help visibility on our end in providing a thorough understanding of your operation and workload functionality. We require contact information for the onboarding process. Who is the technical lead on your team designated to work with us when a workload alarm is triggered? We want to be informed on what your preferred methods are for engagement. Is sending a single email suffice enough to bring awareness if your alarm metrics breach the designated thresholds initially?
And that's, and some of this, again, we may be able to provide, again, coming in. This is why, this is for enterprise support as an add-on. Working with the account team, myself as the TAM or solution architect, ideally would already have that relationship and know a lot of these things with the customer, and we can provide that and really kind of get that conversation going with you.
Yep, perfect. So one of the most important steps in this process and a point of reference throughout is the onboarding questionnaire. This will be sent to you by our technical account manager. And outside of the contact information I've covered, the questionnaire is where we take a deep dive into your application structure. Are there any compliance requirements? How do your end users utilize the applications you're onboarding? What coinciding AWS region does a workload operate in? Are there any on-prem non-AWS components to this workload? Every workload or application requires its very own questionnaire. Incident detection and response will work alongside your designated technical account manager to make sure our end product, the alarms we build, the proactive monitoring we provide accurately reflects the information gathered throughout the onboarding process.
So I see one of the things you'd ask about is compliance information. So not all customers are regulated, right? So that would be an area we may not dive into or go into those questions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so compliance information can just pertain to updates for your application. If the customer has to have a maintenance window, that'll be something they discuss in their onboarding process. So if we have alarms that are monitoring that workload, we know that they're not going off because it's an emergency. They're going off because they're updating and then testing. And so, yeah.
And I think that's another thing to call out is like who you need to contact at the customer, right? If there's an incident or problem, we often want to be able to reach back and make sure not just that the customer is aware, but that we've got the right teams engaged on their side and that we're working in their existing operations and engagement models.
Yep, correct. Okay. So the next step, when it comes to defining alarms, we follow a certain criteria. Alarms should only enter an alarm state if there's a significant impact to the workload and warrants immediate operator attention. These alarms are prioritized enough to engage the attention of the technical resolvers on the customer's end. Incident detection and response will be mitigating this process with you by providing pertinent updates and asking how things look from an end user perspective and business standpoint. The alarm thresholds must be reflecting impact accurately. We want to avoid alarm fatigue. We don't want to take time out of your busy schedule unless it's in order to avoid an actual catastrophe. Again, we work together in this onboarding process to assure accuracy. And we now have the ability, like Shaz said, to use CloudWatch and New Relic to monitor your alarm metrics. If you ever have any observability requests or questions, your technical account manager will provide support. We certainly want to make sure all of our customers' business objectives are being met.
And I think that's because you mentioned it, and me being being a technical account manager, TAM for my customers. I think that's something important to call out. This now becomes something that I, as a TAM with my customers, if they're in this process, I'm making sure in my regular cadences with them that I'm able, I'm checking in on them. I'm making sure that they're still seeing the value, not just from the service, but also if there's any architectural changes or big things that they're planning, that we can make sure that we're aware of them and we're adjusting that observability accordingly, or integrating new components as they come in.
Yeah, and you and I in a live situation would be in constant communication too. So any of those changes you communicate to our team so that we're aware of them.
Right. So part of that notification process during an incident would be to notify the TAM as well.
Yes. Correct. So Shaz, I'm going to pass it over to you to discuss architecture.
Okay, Stephen, so we want to do something different this time around, right? So we brought in microservices architecture, and we want you to play a role of the customer on this call, right? So we are starting from scratch, saying that, okay, we want to onboard a workload to AWS Incident Detection and Response, and this is the architecture, right?
So this is my architecture as the customer.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. All right.
So we want you to ask questions. We're gonna share what we feel, how we can take it forward, but let's have a good discussion on this one.
Okay. So I think this is my application. We sell some custom bobbleheads, if I'm not mistaken, and we use AWS to host all of those services. So where would you want to start with some of these questions?
So what we were trying to do is understand how your workload is spread, right? What regions is it in? What kind of alarms do you have? What are the breaking points? So in this case, what we understand is this is a static website that you are serving, or static or dynamic. You have components through CloudFront, so you are distributing this. This is a public website. It can be private. And then you have a load balancing layer, you have Amazon ECS, and you have a data store layer, right? So what we really want to onboard as part of this workload is what are the key metrics that would make sense that may signify impact, right? So,
For us, obviously, it's our user sales, and I think you mentioned this earlier. Like we want to make sure we're processing sales in a timely fashion. So from the moment they hit and go to checkout, we really only want them to be able to take less than 30 seconds to be able to finish their process of checking out. But as I can see here, I'm looking at the diagram, we integrate with a third-party payment processor. So we don't have that here on the diagram. Is that something that you would be able to help monitor as part of this?
we would love to document that because that's exactly the level of detail we want to understand, right? We want to understand what your upstream and downstream dependencies are. Even if they are not on AWS, we want to make sure that we document it so the response plan and the runbooks are as accurate as possible. And also, let me extend the level of assistance we can provide is if there are third-party health status checks that you are monitoring now, and if you can share with us, which are public, right? We will not be able to integrate via APIs where we're checking those statuses today. But if you are telling us, okay, this is the health status check for your third-party payment provider, which you should include as part of your triage, we are happy to accommodate that request, right? Because when we are going through a run book, we want to make sure we can rule out stuff as soon as possible, so it saves you time and helps you focus on the area that needs help.
And a couple areas that I see here as well, like with the ECS, we still need to be cost conscious, and I don't want ECS just spinning up millions of tasks for me. So I think a threshold, we have a normal volume, of like 100 customers an hour, and we've have some peaks throughout the year. So we'd want to make sure that we alert if we start to go over some of those thresholds or near those thresholds, because that could become a problem for us in terms of cost.
No, that's actually a really good question because as part of this engagement, we do offer our customers a well-architected framework review even before like we go live, right? Or we can also do it parallelly while the workload is being onboarded, right? So that helps us to expose some of those key areas where the workload might need optimizations. Because the scaling is exactly the kind of question that may come up in that kind of a review is like, okay, how do I make sure that I'm scaled up for the event? Like, how do I make sure my workload is not, if there aren't any gaps from an architecture standpoint? So we can cover those. But then the key breaking points, which can be like the health check failures for the ALBs to the tasks. These can be health checks from CloudFront to your load balancers. And then the health checks at the database layer is definitely we would like to ingest, update our runbooks, and possibly, let's say the alarm goes off, the sample bobbleheads that you mentioned, we are not selling enough of them, right? So we will be able to cut AWS support cases parallelly, automated, by the way. So we will be investigating ALB, ECS, the data store layer, because we know all of those contribute to the business functional metric that you mentioned.
Cool. I had a thought and it just went out of my head. So with some of those, I think I might have discussed this before with you or with somebody else. And I think when I talk about alerting and alarming and those thresholds, you had mentioned kind of going through this process and testing this out as part of the onboarding, right? I'd like to kind of understand what that looks like. Like, why am I, what am I going to be alarmed on and get, that's going to wake me up at 3 a.m.? when you detect an incident here?
Yeah, so we establish what workloads and what conjoining alarms you need during the onboarding questionnaire, and then we test them together with the customer. So testing is a very customer-involved process. Coordinating testing times will flow through the TAM. The customer will test creating an incident by manually changing their CloudWatch alarms into the alarm state. And we want to make sure we replicate a live scenario of the incident process from end to end. And then following successful testing, that workload is live and we start monitoring it in real time. But anything that isn't working properly, any thresholds that might need to be reanalyzed, that happens during this process with the customer and the TAM. So you won't, ideally, you won't have any alarms that are triggering in the future that are not necessary and that won't wake the customer out of bed at 3 o'clock in the morning. So, yeah.
And what if I come to you and I say, I want you to monitor everything?
That's totally okay. If that's what you want us to do, that's fine. We don't want to get to the point where, like I said earlier, we're taking time away from the customer and their business functionality and the things they have to do during the day. We really want this relationship to be an emergency type situation. We're here to make sure that there either is no impact or that we minimize that impact as much as possible. So, we don't want to have to contact you for alarms that you're just going to be like, oh, why am I, why are we alerting this on this? You want these alarms to be priority. So.
And right, and it goes back to the idea of that shared responsibility. It's not just us doing this on our own; it's us with the customer, right? And so
Yes.
if it's worth it for them to be woken up at 3 a.m., that's what we want to be looking at. Versus if it's just something informational or a noise, let's keep that out to the side.
Yeah, and then also all that information is built into the response plans and run books. So alarm triggers, it tells us how much time we have to contact the customer. Do they want us to still get on a bridge with them and have a discussion if the alarm recovers because they just want to investigate it, or they want to be able to talk about why that alarm was triggered, or are we just communicating with the customer when the alarm is not recovering straight away, and how much time do we have to get on a bridge and reach out to the correct teams to mitigate the impact. So
it could be that there may be some significant issue where the workload's running, where the application's running, and it may need the customer to make the call. We need to invoke our disaster response plan or DR plan and fail over to something else or somewhere else because of, let's say, that third-party payment processor just goes away for some reason and they're having a problem and we can't do that. You'd then need the input from us. Okay, now is the time to cut over to our emergency plan.
Yes, and we'll analyze all of our data and make sure that it's not an issue on the AWS end, and then the customer can address the third party that they're utilizing or the on-prem service that they're utilizing that's not AWS related.
One of the things as a TAM we like to do is work with customers during peak events, big events. Like we have infrastructure event management as another service with enterprise support, and I work with customers during peak events. How does that play into if they have a big event or a big launch? Let's say launching a new feature or a new product where I now offer beards on my bobbleheads. Can we, are you also working do we pull you in to work with the customer during that event to make sure that they're supported if they're rolling out new features and functionality or we expect a new peak load during a period of time?
We're constantly monitoring their traffic, and if there is a big event, they'll communicate that with you guys. And if there's any necessary, extra precaution that we need to take, then that'll be communicated. But we would just, monitor their traffic, and if the big event caused some type of impact, then, we would go by their run books. And if big events is like a usual thing, then that would be built into their run book and response plans too. So.
Yeah, Stephen. So as Emily said, I think we would love to know. So that's why we are asking all those questions in the onboarding phase itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a retail side that we are supporting.
Mm-hmm.
We would love to know that, okay, we know that, like, we would be almost 99% sure that Black Friday and Cyber Monday are really huge for you, but we would love to know the additional dates as well, right? So if you are cutting in seasonal sales for the bobbleheads, we would love to be aligned to make sure that, okay, our response plans are updated. And it provides the opportunity to the TAMs to be more strategic as well, where we are saying, okay, we need to plan 6 months down the line for this huge sale, right? And we are trying to make sure everything is in line. So they'll continue to do the stuff they do strategically, but they will provide those key insights to this team to ensure that they are ready. And we are actually supporting them on priority when these kind of events are happening.
And thank you, the real Papa C. Yeah, I like my stuff. Tchotchkes, that's for sure. So I had a thought again, and I now lost it. It went out of my head. I was going to have a question to ask for you, Shaz, about that. Oh, obviously we're talking about retail and kind of customer facing sales stuff, but obviously, regardless of the workload, if it's an internally facing enterprise application, customer application that's critical to their employees to do their work, that's something that we can monitor on AWS. Or if it's a business to business type of relationship, or back to, say, a manufacturing facilities, whatever that workload type is, we can pull in and support it. It doesn't just have to be public internet facing.
Absolutely, and that's why I think, so when we say it's built on enterprise support, we are saying every kind of production workload is a potential candidate. If it's a workload where minutes matter, then yes, you should definitely think about AWS incident detection and response.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in reference to those big events, just communicating those dates with your TAM, I mean, it would be just the same as communicating a maintenance window. We're just aware of how to approach it. So the communication is a two-way street between IDR, the TAM, and the customer. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are there other things that we may not have touched on yet that you'd want to call out or have us kind of go through or make your audience aware of? Or if there's anybody in chat, in the audience that, has some questions, please throw them in there. More than happy to take the questions. Not necessarily about where I got all my stuff, but most of it probably did come from Amazon.
Well, I can summarize the IDR talking points. So we obviously want a customer to walk away with confidence that we fully understand their applications. We're aware of what regions their applications live in. We have a strategy for engagement. Again, it's a two-way communication street. If we go through the runbooks and we go and test their workloads and they don't, the SLA that we're following, they want to alter it, we'll go through and do that. If in the future they want to alter a workload, that's communication that would happen between you and the customer, and then we would work alongside to change those metrics. And the communication threshold of when an alarm is triggered is, do we have a 5-minute window to contact the customer? Is that too short? Is that too long? Do we need to change it? Is there a specific workload that they're onboarding that we will address differently than the rest of their workloads? It's just, like Shaz said, a very flexible structure. And it's really based on the relationship that, we create between AWS and the customer. So
And I think that's a good point in their confidence.
Mm-hmm.
I think that can be undervalued, is to have the confidence from a customer perspective to know that you've done all of the good work that you can do to make sure your workload's ready and running and functional. And again, from my own experience working at different companies over my career, and even working with customers, here at AWS, those situations, it's a big night and day difference when you're in the middle of a problem late at night trying to figure out what's going on. The response of teams is so much different when you have this preparation in place, and when you have this, you're focused not on figuring out where do I need to look, but you're focused on what do I need to do to fix the problem. And that saves you so much time. It saves you so much anxiety and frustration through it. And I've seen that where, problems happen, stuff breaks, or stuff gets overloaded, and having that confidence. I've been with customers that have gone through, that have had the well architected, that have had a learning and alarming in place. And then it just comes in. It's like, oh, there was some unanticipated case where we have this problem, and they spent the time, just let's put a workaround in and had a good process to get that going. And I think having that confidence can change how you respond to things, because it's different. Like if you're just talking about it now, middle of the day, whatever, but when you have to roll out of bed at 3 a.m. or midnight, and now you're in the heat of it, and you have executives pounding at the door saying what's going on, having this in place can really boost your confidence to know that you can respond confidently to them.
And Stephen, those calls that you mentioned with the execs, with all the stakeholders on a call at 3 a.m. are not exactly cheap calls, right? Those are really, really expensive calls. And it's just not about the duration that you are in for. It's some of the transient impact to the whole team, right? And you still have to be ready for the business open at 9 a.m. You still need all the stakeholders back working and looking at the critical metrics during the business day. So it's not just one-to-one relation of that expensive or painful call where we're trying to restore the business. It's all the things that come after, which makes this such a need for production workloads, because your initial call is minimized. Hopefully it doesn't happen, because all the learning mechanisms and all the engagements that have gone through, and then you get time as a customer team to put strategic lens, and you can use your time for strategic initiatives and not feel burnt out after a major event, because you were just trying to figure out what happened and how to restore your workload after an outage.
Right. And I think that burnout too, as well, as if it's one incident after another, after another, after another, and you're just like, when will this end? So yeah, cool.
Shaz, you talked about the post-incident review and that being part of the process. I think that's important too, from a TAM's, and so that, if a incident is repetitive, then all those technical things are figured out, so it's not, it doesn't continue to happen. And then, our services are supporting the customer in the best way. So
yeah, absolutely, because for our customers who are supporting these applications at an enterprise level, the workload count can be in thousands. How do you prioritize the key workloads and then the key alarms and failure points for those workloads? It's an ever-going task. But when we are providing that level of information after an incident, it gives those key discussion points, strategic points, not just for the customers, but also for the AWS account teams to help out our customers and make sure that we can implement those as soon as possible, or figure out strategies where the impact is mitigated and prevented.
Yeah, and throughout an incident, we're tracking all the information, like when the metrics like spiked at a threshold, when it recovered, what the error was. Just everything is very notated and then passed off, so that post-incident review can happen. And just we're very aware of the issues and what is causing them, and how to help mitigate. So.
And all of this is done within those customer accounts, right? It's their workloads. It's all that logging, all of that information, all of those the monitoring and stuff happens there. It goes back to our to the incident response teams to be alarmed on and take action on, but they have all of that information with them, and they can see it as well.
Yes. Yeah. And the ability to analyze things and grab the right teams and communicate with them. So they give us a little bit of more insight as to what's actually going on in the background. So, yeah.
Great. Any other closing thoughts today? Okay, cool. So thank you for joining us today. Thanks for sharing and going deeper into this service with us. Really appreciate it. Thanks for everybody who joined our chat today. So we looked at how you can onboard your AWS applications into our enterprise support as an add-on incident detection and response. If there's any questions we didn't answer or you think of later on, please post your questions on repost.aws, where one of our experts can provide you with an answer to your question. That question could also become a topic on one of our future shows. And if you have feedback for us, please check the chat box on the right for a link to our survey, or you can email us at AWS Supports You at Amazon.com. We want to hear from you. Tell us what else you would like to see on this show. And please join us next Monday, March 20th at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific, where we'll be discussing securing your AWS workloads with SAP. Shaz, Emily, thanks again for coming on to the show. Thanks for joining us today at AWS Supports You, and happy cloud computing.
Thanks for having us.